Hello, everyone. As I start up my channel, I'd like to answer some of the inevitable questions that people will ask me. Who am I? How did I come to faith? Why did I decide to start this channel? I'll be answering all of these questions in today's video, which should be one of the first 3 videos that I upload to my channel. If everything goes to plan, this video should be dropping on Easter 2024. With that out of the way, I'm NotSoStThomas, and this is my story. Let's start with who I am. My name is Thomas, but you can just call me Tom. I'm 25 years old, and I'm a devout Reformed Baptist. The NotSoStThomas name is a joke of the fact that my actual name is Thomas, and that I would not consider myself anything close to a saint in the way that it's used today. Like all of us, I try but ultimately fall short of God's standard. Next, and this is going to be the bulk of the video, will be my coming to faith story. I grew up in a small town in New Jersey. My dad was raised Catholic and my mom was raised Baptist, although I'd consider them nominal Christians back then. That is to say that they never went to church or read the Bible at home. Christian in name only, as it's said. I grew up with a very vague notion of who God was, and I kind of knew about the crucifixion of Jesus, but not really. Over the years, this led me to having some, say, odd beliefs. For a brief stint in middle school, I held to a strange kind of universalism, which thought that every religion was correct, and whatever you thought would happen to you when you die is what would happen. I have no idea what happened to it, but I do remember even trying to write a unified creation story that would explain the existence of every religion. Even if I could find it, I'm confident that it would sound like the ravings of a madman. By the time high school started, I had largely abandoned this belief, realizing how dumb it was, in favor of first deism, then ultimately ending up in agnosticism. I kept with that belief for a few years until I was 23, but we'll get there. When I was 16, my parents got divorced, and after I got out of high school, I moved in with my mom a little ways outside of Philadelphia. I stayed there for a few years, doing the typical young adult thing of thinking that I had it all figured out, and irritating my poor mother all the while. Shortly after I turned 21, I decided to move out. If you did the math, you'd know that this was in 2020. Yeah, this would be my first in a long series of blunders. I worked for Walmart at the time, and quickly realized that with my salary I would not be able to afford to live in the same town as my mom. After looking outside of PA, I found a place that I could afford in West Virginia. I could transfer Walmart locations and make the same amount with a much lower cost of living. So I moved, and this would start blunder number 2. The Walmart I was transferring to couldn't actually facilitate the transfer until 3 weeks after I got to West Virginia, so I ended up going a month without a paycheck, which made me eat into my savings. Between the moving costs and that, I was now flat broke. Enter blunder number 3. I'd been working at my new Walmart for around 3.5 months when I quit because I could not get along with my new management staff. I quit before finding a new job because I figured that I would get a new job in a week or 2 with my nearly 3 years of retail experience. Any retail store should want to hire me after all. 5 months went by with no work. The only reason I wasn't evicted was because of my parents helping me out and my landlord being gracious with me, which I will always be thankful for. During that time out of work, I was doing pretty much nothing but playing video games, watching anime, and reading fanfiction. I was not in a good place mentally. I then got a job working overnight at a local gas station, which, due to severe understaffing, kept me quite busy. At my height there, I was working multiple double-length shifts per week, even once nearly going 2 weeks without a day off, while still not being able to really crawl out of the financial hole that I'd put myself in. After a few months there, I was fired over a false accusation, which I don't really want to get into. I'll save that for later. But after only a few days, I was able to get another job as a dishwasher at a restaurant. Only lasted about a month at that job before I couldn't take it anymore and left. I then went another 5 months without working. More video games, more anime, more time wasting. When a friend of mine told me he could get me a job working under him at a local sandwich shop. There, I worked 60 hours a week, every week, for multiple months. I was starting to get into a much better financial situation due to now being in a cheaper apartment with a couple roommates. But outside of work, I was still living for nothing but mindless entertainment. I was depressed, and despite having roommates, kind of lonely. It was at this point that I got curious about God and religion, hoping that something could bring me out of this funk. It was around this time that YouTube would decide to recommend a Mike Winger video. Probably couldn't tell you which one anymore, but this started me down a road of Christian apologetics. I started to actually read the Bible for the first time, and start watching more YouTube apologetics. Channels like Mike Winger, Inspiring Philosophy, Impact Video Ministries, and Apologia Studios helped me to reconcile some of the objections I still had to Christianity. That summer, I was still barely a Christian. I did believe that God existed, but I had not yet begun to pray or go to church. It was then that I had met a girl on a dating app. She was Christian, and it was very important to her. We lived on opposite sides of the state, so our relationship was primarily long distance. During the course of our relationship, we only met in person twice. She invited me to go to church with her one week, and I agreed despite my schedule. I had to work overnight Saturday night into Sunday morning, so I left work at 5 a.m. to take the 4-hour trip to see her. Being awake now for 22 hours, I was very tired and more than a little grumpy. Some of the things I thought to myself at that church service I am not very proud of. I was not in a good mental place to enjoy the service. We ended up breaking up a couple months later for unrelated reasons. It wasn't until March of 2023, after I turned 24, for me to actually be able to go to church due to my work schedule. At this point, I had no idea what denomination I was going to be because I hadn't gotten heavily into theology yet. I was intending to shop around for a church because there are at least a dozen in my town, and the obvious first choice was the church that was less than 100 yards from my apartment at the time. So I started there and never left. At the time of writing, I've now been there for a year. The pastors there are amazing, and the community has some of the nicest and most welcoming people I've ever met. The rest is history. I'm now a devout, professing Christian. So why am I making this channel? There are a couple answers to this question. The first one is that God saved my life, and I want to bring that light to as many people as I can. Even if this channel only ever helps to win one believer, then it would have all been worth it. I was inspired by a Charles Spurgeon quote. If sinners be damned, at least let them leap to hell over our bodies. And if they will perish, let them perish with our arms about their knees, imploring them to stay. If hell must be filled, at least let it be filled in the teeth of our exertions, and let no one go there unwarned and unprayed for. This was a powerful quote that struck a chord in me the moment I read it. We must do whatever can be done to rescue the lost. The other reason is that I want to help other Christians to become the smartest, most educated Christians they can be. 1 Peter 3:15 tells us to always be prepared to make a defense for the hope that is in us, and I want to give Christians the tools they need to do just that. The third answer is that I also want to be a good teacher of the word to as many Christians as possible. That's why, alongside this video, my two others that I'm uploading at the same time are about alcohol in the Bible, and the first video in my book-by-book Bible study series. With all that out of the way, I want to leave you with the words of my favorite Irish blessing. May the road rise to meet you, may the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face, and the rains fall soft upon your fields. Until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand.